Hi everyone, I'm Christine. I'm the Sport Development Officer at Equestrian Queensland. Welcome to the Biosecurity webinar. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see that there's a window where you can ask questions, and I'll pass these on to David throughout the webinar. So I will hand over to David McNabb from Biosecurity Queensland.
Okay, thanks Christine, and thank you to Equestrian Queensland for organising this this webinar tonight.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Information to you. We apologise for being so late in the process of the implementation of the Biosecurity Act. As you may or may not be aware, it goes live on the 1st of July, so we have a lot of communication to do between now and the 1st of July to ensure all our industry stakeholders are aware of what the new requirements are. It's been a long process, the development of this Act, and we're still crossing a few T's and dotting a few I's. I don't have any fact sheets or printed material for dissemination just yet. I keep saying I hope it's next week, and I'll say that again, I hope it's next week. As soon as we do have any material like that for individuals and groups, I'll put out through all the key equestrian groups in Queensland, and certainly via Equestrian Queensland. So I was invited here today to talk around the Biosecurity Act and its implementation. So just bear with me while I see if I can make sure this thing works. And not the first time I hit the button, Christine. So and then that's going to work from there. So I'll get into some fairly good specifics for you in a minute, but it is important that you understand where a couple of key concepts where we're coming from with the Biosecurity Act, because it underpins some of the information that I'll share with you in a minute or two. So it has been a long time in development, the Biosecurity Act. It was assented into Parliament in 2014, so it's due to go live on the 1st of July. We're busy in the development of the regulations at the moment. So the Act is the overarching framework, and the regulations is the how to do stuff. The important thing about the Biosecurity Act is what we call contemporary legislation. It is not prescriptive like old-fashioned legislation. It's about an outcome. And in the context of biosecurity, the outcome is good, healthy animals. In the context of, say, something like cattle tick, it's about making sure you don't take cattle tick infested animals across into the free zone. But we don't put too much prescription around how you achieve that. It's much more flexible, which is much better for industry to achieve the outcome that we desire. There is a couple of key underpinning concepts, and that's the far right little triangle looking shape, which I'll talk to in a minute. But the three of those key underpinning concepts around the Act are shared responsibility, the general biosecurity obligation, and risk-based decision making. Risk-based decision making is very clearly important for the horse industry when it comes to the cattle tick world, because whilst horses can and do get cattle ticks, they are a lower risk. So we can implement different control mechanisms for the movement of horses across the tick line, and I'll get to that later. The general biosecurity obligation, which I'll bang on a little bit more in detail, and please forgive me, I'm from the government, so I'll slip into acronym speak here soon, and I'll call it the GBO, so please bear with me if I keep doing that. So it provides the regulatory framework for the management of biosecurity risks in Queensland, and as I've already said, it's much more flexible because it's about an outcome, and it gives the owners of stock options and flexibility the way they abide by their obligations. And the shared responsibility concept, really key to understand this, because this is a bit of a mindset change. This is the principle that all parties involved in biosecurity, and that's very clearly government, industry and individuals. So I understand that some of you on the webinar tonight are event organisers, so that's an industry body, and I understand that some of you are individuals. And clearly I'm from the government, so we all have this shared responsibility around the management of biosecurity risks within Queensland. So each of those three groups should bear their proportionate share of the responsibility for the mitigation of biosecurity risks and share that cost of those responses. And a short, simple line of that is those who take the risk own the risk and are responsible for managing the risk. So what's the role of government? So we are, in blunt terms, we are no longer involved in that day-to-day management of biosecurity risks on properties. We are very still clearly involved in biosecurity, but we take a different approach into the future. Our main activities will be around the regulation and compliance. So we'll establish the frameworks on behalf of industry. What are the risks that need to be identified and how they can be managed, and then clearly a big ticket item for us is around information and education. So if I advise you as an individual or industry that this particular thing, this biosecurity risk needs to be managed, then I need to establish how that should be managed and give good information out. So that's a big ticket role for the government. What's the role of industry? So event organisers is an industry role. Equestrian Queensland is an industry body. Take all reasonable and practical measures to prevent or minimise the biosecurity risks affecting your event. And that could be simple things such as knowing those legal obligations required for different carriers attending your event. In this context, the carriers are horse events. Know your obligations around the movement records and cattle tick requirements. So part of your obligations and your responsibilities could be to have effective biosecurity plans in place. And Equestrian Queensland has been extremely proactive. Well, the entire horse industry has been extremely proactive about implementing biosecurity plans in the past 4 or 5 years, driven by some very key events that have happened to the industry, including equine influenza. And then for a role of industry, again, is know those risks that are associated with each of those various carriers at your event and identify how to manage them. And that's what an effective biosecurity plan is. It is identifying those risks that could occur in relation to the horses that are turning up to your event and how you will manage those risks. And then the individual's role. Now, as with all good things that occur in society, it starts and stops with the actions of the individuals. So what is the individual's role? Take all reasonable and practical measures to prevent or minimise the biosecurity risks affecting their property and their industry. And again, that could include knowing those legal obligations for the requirements for the movement. What are your movement records? But again, know what risks affect your livestock and how you can go about managing them. And then clearly seeking information and informing yourself of the appropriate treatments for your situation and seeking valid information from appropriate sources. So probably Facebook is not the best place to get advice around what you should and shouldn't do in the context of, say, something like Hendra. Clearly the government has a massive amount of information around Hendra, and that's a better place to be seeking information as opposed to a quick chat over the back fence with your neighbour. The General Biosecurity Obligation, or the GBO, as I mentioned before, this is a direct quote from the Act, and this underpins the entire Biosecurity Act. So the General Biosecurity Obligation is very similar to the duty of care concept in the Animal Care and Protection Act world and the duty of care concept in the workplace health and safety world. So it tells us that this obligation requires all people who deal with biosecurity matter or a carrier, if they know or ought reasonably to know that it poses a biosecurity risk, to take all reasonable and practical measures to prevent or minimise that risk. So what is that? What is a couple of those key terms in that? What is know or ought reasonably know mean in the context of you? Well, if you're an event organiser, this is your industry. You're a professional in this. Sorry, you may not be a professional, but you're well involved in this industry. It's why you've taken on an active role as an organiser. So you know the risks that are associated in relation to moving horses. Even if you don't know, it's reasonable to know it's reasonable as an individual to know there are expectations on you when you purchase a horse, that there are certain things you must do. And one of those things is in relation to biosecurity and what are the diseases and things that need to be managed. So again, seek advice and inform yourself appropriately. Asking questions before accepting stock onto your event or your property. and understand the movements, the requirements for moving livestock from your property. So what are some of those things that would be considered reasonable and practical? There are some things that will be defined in regulation, and I'll get to a couple of those very soon. But some of the other things are just what is reasonable and practical. So again, have a biosecurity plan in place, seek advice and inform yourself about the appropriate treatments and in relation to the risks in your area. For event organisers, establish the rules for the competitors to attend your event. This is your event. These are your grounds. You need to manage it. So they're your rules. Decide what they are and communicate those to your competitors. Okay, so a couple of the things that are definite in the Act is registering with Biosecurity Queensland. You're all probably familiar with the PIC concept, the Property Identification Code. So it is a legal obligation right at this point in time for any property that has animals, livestock on it, in your case, the horses, the owner of the property where the animals are kept is responsible to register with Biosecurity Queensland, and we give you a PIC. There is some slight differences under the Biosecurity Act in that into the future it will be the person in care and control of the animal is responsible to register. Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean that will always be the owner of the property. On a lot of occasions it will be the owner of the property, but not on all occasions. So it's you're in care and control of the animal. You must register with Biosecurity Queensland. If you aren't the owner of that property, then you must provide us with that owner's details, and we will register you as what we call a registrable biosecurity entity, or again, I'm from the government, the acronym is RBE. So there is a little bit of that talk out there already amongst industry, that RBE concept. It is just a slightly nuanced approach to who needs to register. So that may mean, so once you're registered with us, we will then still allocate you a PIC number. So if you register with us and you tell us the lot on plan details and that lot on plan already has a PIC number, we will just advise you of that PIC. But if it's a brand new registration, we will allocate you a new PIC number. Now clearly if it's the person in care and control of the animal and not the owner of a property, that may mean that one PIC number now may have multiple RBEs on it. And that would capture the situation, which is reasonably common in the horse world, of you adjusting many horses or stabling many horses on one property. So there could be one property with one PIC number would have multiple RBEs on it. And the reason for doing that is to make sure we know where these animals are kept firstly, but secondly, who are the people that we need to talk to if there is an event or an incident goes on. So if we know the PIC number's there and we know there's 10 RBEs on that place, we'll have contact details in relation to them. The other important part is, and this again reflects what our current requirements are, is that showgrounds and event grounds also need to be registered as well. And that links to the movement records, which will be coming soon. So movement records, and that is something else that is quite different under the new legislation. So a movement record will be required every time a horse moves from a property to another property. Okay, and it's what we call a movement record must be created. Now we've deliberately moved away from the term waybill because waybill has the old-fashioned connotations of a piece of paper. A movement record does not have to be a piece of paper. It can be captured in any format that you choose, as long as it captures those details that are, as in Dot pointed out there on the screen. So the important details that must be captured are where is the horse moving from, where is the horse going to, and the name of the person at that destination receiving the horse, the person who is completing the record, a description of the horse, and a date for the movement of that horse. Okay, so there are already apps being developed out there in the horse industry. New South Wales is also implementing similar legislation in the very near future as well. And there is a joint group developing an app that will fit both New South Wales Act and Queensland's Act. I can't quite tell you where the development is in that, but it won't be too far away. That is just one methodology. Another electronic methodology could be simply texting. the person where you're going to, and you keep the text. You can continue on using the paper-based system. The current horse health declaration system works perfectly well, and that would certainly be a movement record into the future. There is one exemption for travel from your property to within 20 kilometres of that place if you're moving the horse for husbandry purposes. And husbandry purposes would be defined as normal husbandry practices. And you're looking at something like moving an animal to and from a place all in one day. So you're not going there and staying for a couple of days and then returning home. So whilst it's legislated that is that exemption, we just must remember what we're attempting to achieve for these movement records. And it's all about us being able to trace animals when something goes wrong, an incident occurs. So if we have a Hendra situation, say, and I come to your property and I ask for your movement records, I'm going to be looking for definite dates. So if you tell me that I moved a horse 18 days ago to my mate's place up the road and the horse is still there, I'm not going to have to worry about going to his place and quarantining it, because 18 days is outside our area of interest. But on the flip side of that is if you tell me that you've moved a horse 12 days ago and here's my movement record, and this was the horse and it's gone up to my mate's place, well, then I am going to need to go and see him, and I'm going to need to look closely at that horse, because that may be a Hendra risk. Okay, so that's the reason that we need movement records, because it provides traceability for us. So even though there is an exemption in place, and it's got that broad term of exemption for husbandry purposes, even if you can keep in the back of your mind still making some sort of documented note, however you're going to do it, because it's all about the outcome, and that's what we're chasing. So the additional part of the movement records then is the person who receives a horse onto their property must also create a movement record. And again, that can be in any format you choose, as long as it captures those same details. Now again, depending on which way you do it, you can create a new record completely, or simply take a copy of the sender's record. And again, if the sender decides to do it in a text and they send you a text, both of you had exactly the same details on your movement record, both of you just keep the text. If somebody decides to fill out the full-on waybill and you receive that horse at your place, take a photo of that horse health declaration. That's your movement record. So we've kept it very flexible, because we do recognise that filling out that waybill is a little bit burdensome, and we're trying to keep this as easy as possible. And again, I go back to the intention of the Act, is because we know when we've gone to try and trace movements around some of our incidents, people's memories just is not sufficient when it comes to critical diseases. So all records must be kept for 2 years and able to be presented to an inspector if they ask for it. But the record does not need to be in the possession of the drover unless they are crossing the tick line. So as long as you create the movement record, that's all I'm needing. So I'll go to you and say, can you produce that record to me? So it can be in a logbook back in the house or wherever you want to keep it. But when you cross the tick line, that movement record must be in the drover's possession. Very important to understand for those who do travel up to the Downs and to the tick-free shows. You will probably get stopped, or possibly get stopped at the gates by Biosecurity Queensland inspectors, and we're more interested in the biosecurity risks associated with cattle tick and other diseases. But I'm sure you've all got a story of being stopped at the top of the Toowoomba Range by the stock squad, and they're not necessarily interested in biosecurity risks. They're interested in the letter of the law, and when the letter of the law says you must have your movement record on you, if you don't, you become a very easy pinch for them, and that'll cost you a couple of $100. So it's important to remember that whilst your biosecurity risk may be managed, because this is defined in regulation, you will still need to make sure you have your movement records on you. So event organisers, in the context of an event organiser, they also must keep records. And again, it's those same details as the individuals creating the movement records, but with a couple of additional pieces of information: when the horse arrived at the event, and more importantly, when the horse left the event and where it's going to, and the date of the event, which will always be captured anyway. So again, that's kept very flexible depending on what your event is doing and what your processes are. The camp drafting world tells me that they have quite a good sophisticated electronic nominations process nowadays, and if that captures the exact details of the animals entering their events, then that's all the movement record that I need to see. If you, again, to continue on running along with the horse health declaration process, if that's your event's requirements, then again just collect a copy of that at the gate or take a photo of it at the gate. Just get the person to nominate the date they're leaving and when they're going home to. So again, we've tried to keep this flexible, but we do require those movements because they do provide extremely valuable advice for us. Crossing the tick line, which is possibly of interest to some of you. So this is where we get into the risk-based decision-making process that can underpin the Act. So clearly horses are a lower risk when it comes to cattle ticks, but they still pose a risk, okay? We find that about 98% of horse movements across the tick line are tick-free, but the 2% are quite heavily infested. And I'm sure that you've all found that yourselves, in that those horses that do get the occasional tick on them are the ones that are possibly out of work, they're in the paddock, maybe they're a little bit, they're not being fed up anymore. Their susceptibility to ticks becomes increased at that point. So they very definitely can carry cattle tick. So the risk still has to be dealt with, but it doesn't have to be dealt with in the same context as moving cattle. So it will be a regulated requirement that you can only move tick-free animals into the tick-free zone. But you have the choice of how you go about ensuring your animal is tick-free. Okay, so we will provide you with a series of options, and they will be described in what we're calling the Biosecurity Manual, and they will be supported by procedures. And the manual and the procedures will be available on the DAF website. They are not available at this point in time. They are not a legally valid document until the 1st of July, so we have this funny little space where we can't put them up and advertise them because they aren't a legal document. But we propose on putting them up on the website upwards of about a week out from the 1st of July, so everybody is well and truly aware of what they are. And they'll be the same basic things that you can do now to get your animal to be tick-free. And I think I've got a slide with that. Yeah, so some of those reasonable steps around tick-free. You can continue to inspect and spray your animals to get them to be tick-free, and a procedure will describe to you how to inspect a horse to identify a tick. There'll be a procedure there to help you assist you identify a tick and know what stages of the tick you might be finding. There'll be a procedure there that will describe what is other methodologies, so holding them in tick-free environments. So your stabled and groomed horse, we know that if a horse is regularly stabled and groomed, as most event horses are, they will get rid of their ticks. Tick-free environments, again, even your paddocked horses, if they're not in contact with cattle or the neighbours' properties haven't got cattle, that's a fairly tick-free environment. And again, if you inspect that horse and it's tick-free, you make that declaration on your movement record, and you travel over to the free area. The current permit system that you may be used to coming in yearly and getting your multiple movement permits, or for those of you in the free area that travel down into the infested area and you've done one of those owner treatment schemes, those schemes and those permits will no longer exist. As of June 30, all of those permits will be expired and those schemes no longer exist. So if you're coming from the free area and you're coming down to an event in the tick-infected area, it's going to be important to know what is the risk that is associated with that grounds that you're travelling to. If you're coming to somewhere like the ECA will maintain and manage their property so that they are definitely a tick-free grounds, so that when your horse goes home from the ECA, that's what you can declare on your movement record, that it's tick-free because it's only been in a tick-free environment. So these are some of the things that may want to be considered by some of the event organisers, how they manage their grounds. If you only hold horse events, then it may be quite beneficial for you to establish a process that you ensure it maintains its tick-free status, and that will be beneficial for your competitors coming from the tick-free part of the state and returning home, because they will be able to declare that they have simply been into a tick-free area. In the short term, moving back to New South Wales, there will still be a requirement for horses to be inspected and treated and supplied with a biosecurity certificate from what we call an accredited certifier. And the accredited certifier is similar to our current third-party providers, who, if you're going back to New South Wales, is predominantly Robert down there through Arachula. The benefit of the accredited certifier scheme is it's been expanded, so they are not tied to specific dips and spray stations. The accredited certifier can go anywhere that they choose to do those things they need to do. So there's been some events in the past 12 months where we've had to give approvals and exemptions so that our accredited certifiers can go to certain places. There will be no longer a need to come to Biosecurity Queensland and get that approval. If you can find yourself an accredited certifier that is prepared to do the job at your grounds, because you know you've got a lot of New South Wales competitors, then that option is opened up for you. Those accredited certifiers will have a list of those on our web come 1st of July, and there may be, depending on what your organisation is doing, there may be also an opportunity for you to actually get an accredited certifier approved with us, and then they can simply be doing your events. I think I said... Okay, yep, so you'll have the different options around how you manage to get your animal to be tick-free. What you then simply do is nominate what you have done to abide by your obligation on your movement record. So you will make a simple declaration. These horses are tick-free because I inspected them on this date and they have come out of a tick-free environment, my stable and groom facility, or alternatively, they're tick-free because I have inspected them and I sprayed them on this date, or whatever those options that you choose to do. So you must have your movement record on you when you cross the tick line, and you simply make that extra declaration on the bottom as to what you've done to abide by your obligations. So then clearly, if we reflect on what our shared responsibility role is, if we go back to the beginning and we talk around event organisers, knowing what those requirements are. So clearly you have to collect or make records for participants competing at your event, but your general biosecurity obligation then also starts to kick in, and now you start to look at that and go, well, okay, my competitors that are coming up from the tick infested area, are they making sure they are abiding by their tick requirements? So any of those with addresses coming up out of the ticky country, you may want to take on board the fact that they should have their declarations in place. Now, that doesn't mean we expect you to be the policeman of the system. You have your rules, you have your biosecurity plan in place, and you can implement those rules. But when it comes to somebody that may not have done the right thing, when it comes to something like crossing the tick line, we don't expect you to be the policeman of the system, but what is, if we go back to what is reasonable and practical for you as an event organiser to do, very clearly advise your clients that maybe they are in breach of their tick requirements. And another reasonable and practical thing that you could do is take those names and addresses and inform Biosecurity Queensland. Okay, we don't expect you to be standing at the gate refusing entry. Oh, go your hardest, do that if you like, it's your event. But we don't have that expectation that you are the policeman. We are clearly very much the people in the compliance space, and the Biosecurity Act does come with significant powers for our inspectors to make sure things are being done properly. Okay, so that's the three musts around the Biosecurity Act. So those movement records, register with us, and then crossing the tick line. So the movement records component is a little bit different, but if you understand that what the intention of what we're trying to achieve and keep that as flexible as possible, and then the cattle tick requirements, I think you'll agree that will take away a lot of that burden of getting your permits or having to stop at Halidon for inspections and sprays and things like that. However, the flip side of that is to make sure that we continue to use these forums, Equestrian Queensland and our other industry bodies, to make sure that information continues to be put out there so that the appropriate actions are taken by everybody. So that's about all I have to formally put across. I understand Christine's probably been accumulating some questions.
Yes, so just got a few questions. If you've got any more questions, keep asking them. So one on the RBE. Will each club using an event ground need to have their own RBE or just the event ground?
No, just the event ground. The way that it's the way that the Act is described, it says it's the person in control of the grounds, in day-to-day control of the grounds. So usually that is just one person. If it's a council grounds, usually that would fall back to the council, probably a chief operating officer or something like that, to make sure they register. And then, but the event organisers of an event at those grounds are the responsible ones for the movement record.
Another one then following on movement records. Event organisers don't always know exactly when competitors leave an event. Is it okay if the organiser has been informed of the final destination, say on the original entry form, that they nominate the final day of the event as the date of departure? In other words, is there leeway to have the departure date to be plus or minus a day or two?
Yeah, sure. Most events would only be captured over a weekend, so yes, give and take that small time frame difference there, that'd be fine. You just have to be a little bit cautious. Some of the longer events, state championships, say for Pony Club, which is held virtually over a week and a half. The Toowoomba Show is 10 days. The Ekka is 10 days. You're starting to get into time frames there that blow out our ability to do decent traceability. So yes, I appreciate that is an additional burden on you to get definitive times they're leaving. And if it's only on those weekend events, then I'm sure we'd be able to find that. But just be a little bit cautious on your events when they are over a longer period.
Question on Hendra. If a horse comes down with Hendra at an event after the 1st of July and that horse is unvaccinated by the owner's choice, who's responsible for the costs associated with controlling the outbreak? Is it the owner or the government or the event organisers, or does it vary in different circumstances?
Okay, so the government will react on confirmation of a positive Hendra test. Okay, so clearly there would have been an exclusion test done. So at that point, hopefully your biosecurity plan has kicked in and you have done lots of good things, isolate it, prevent contact from other horses and humans and all the rest of it. When we take on control of a property, we make a series of risk assessments, and that assessment is all around what's contacted that infected horse. Now, at an event, that can be difficult. If it's a big event, knowing where that infected horse has been and what may or may not have been in contact with it. But it's all about the direct contact with that infected horse. This is where your biosecurity plan becomes extremely important. Firstly, a Hendra infected horse is a fairly crook horse. You are going to notice it. Firstly, why it would be at an event is a little bit strange. And secondly, as soon as a horse is identified as getting ill at an event, that's when your biosecurity plan should kick into play. And those animals are isolated and segregated and all the rest of the things, good things that make up a biosecurity plan. From the context of costs, it is not borne by the government, put it that way. So that'll have to be negotiated depending on what level of restrictions are put on. If we can't make good, valid risk assessments quickly because it's a big event and that horse remained in public exposure to multiple other horses, then we will have multiple horses on site locked down, for want of a better description, and that will be the responsibility of the individuals to look after those animals during that period, or the event organisers during that period. So we'll take on control of doing the good biosecurity things and testing, but we do not take on control of feeding and looking after those horses during that period.
And the final question for now, saying that another one's got through. So if we don't have to stop at tick gates, such as New South Wales, what happens when you are photographed going past the tick gates? In the past, you received a fine for bypassing.
No, so going to New South Wales, you will still require that biosecurity certificate from an accredited certifier. And the same as it goes at this point in time now, you'll get your permit, it's called nowadays, or a cattle tick inspection treatment declaration. You'll get that from your third party provider, and you will go across the Kira gates. And if you've been photographed, they've got the records of who is and isn't coming. So that nothing will change on that context going to New South Wales. Not stopping at the tick gates or at the clearing facilities in Queen is only internal of movement of Queensland.
Another one on movement records. If somebody has horses coming onto their property for a couple of hours, say for a lesson, do they still need to have a movement record for that?
Yeah, sure, and that's probably one of those within 20 kilometre, well, if they are within 20 kilometres, that's determined as a neighbouring property, then husbandry, exercise and training lessons, those sorts of things would be considered husbandry. But again, I go back to the point, let's understand what the intention of this Act is. So if you can provide me with any type of basic record keeping movement, if it is for a lesson, you're probably charging that person. So even an invoice book that states on this day, Mary Smith was here with her Shetland pony, even that sort of basic information is extremely valuable for us.
At the moment, that seems to be all the questions, unless anybody else pops any through. Any second?
Any second, that's good. So look, even if you think of other things afterwards, you're more than welcome to continue to email them through to either, on behalf of Equestrian Queensland, I'm saying email them through to Christine or your other organising bodies, and they can get them back to me. I also extend an invite for other event organisers out there from other peak bodies. If you are holding similar events and that you would like me to speak to those, then please get in contact with me. Christine will have my details, and I do understand that there are some other members online from the QHIA and possibly other organisations, so they've probably got my contact details as well. So I can't get to every little small individual organisation club event. We're a limited resource that's stretched at the moment, but I can get to groupings that are of significant numbers because we get a best bang for buck in that context. So please give me a call, and if you've got other questions, then please keep sending them through.
We just have one final question, I think. Do government-owned facilities have a PIC number automatically? So the example is SEQ Water.
Well, only if there are animals on that place. If there are animals on that place, there would be somebody in the care and control of those animals, and then that person has the obligation to register with us. So, I mean, forestry leases, town reserves, town commons, even though they're government owned, because there are animals on there, someone is in care and control of them, then they have an obligation to register with us. I'm not aware specifically of SEQ Water. They usually don't put animals on and around their water supply, so I'm not aware of that one in particular.
Okay, I think that's it for the questions, but if any others come through, I will forward those on to David to answer. One question that did come through was whether this would go up as a recording. Yes, it will, so hopefully it'll be up either tomorrow or Monday on the Equestrian Queensland website. So everybody that's attended the webinar tonight will email you tomorrow with a link to the website where you can find the recording and you can share that with anybody that you think would be interested in viewing it. So that's it. Thank you very much,
Cool.
David. That was great.
Thank you very much, and thank you again to Equestrian Queensland and Christine for organising it. Good night.